Well, welcome back. Our next speaker is Sarai Castañeda. She is also another student of Oak Grove High School in San Jose, mentored by Jennifer Claudio. Her objective is one day to study law. And with that in mind, what better than start by the constitutions, And so with you, Sarai Castañeda, with fonts and formats of constitutions. Have the floor, Sarai.
All right. Hi, I am Sarai Castañeda. I am from Oak Grove High School in San Jose, California, in the United States. This is my first TUG conference, and I'm excited to be here. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the fonts and formats of the constitutions. And as we first get started into this, I kind of wanted to bring back what kind of got me into kind of studying this. Well, what got me started into this is I took AP US History my junior year. I'm entering as a senior this year. And as I took that class, I really learned a lot about the United States and its involvements in other countries, especially in other countries' governments. As I looked through it, and we were towards the end of the year, we were going through the World War II era to the Cold War era. We were brushing on the topic of the United States feeling like they want to have the most influence all over the world. And through that era, I learned that they wanted to have the influence through the Southeast Asian countries, like Vietnam, Korea, and the Philippines. And what brought me to the shock was that the United States actually kind of helped write the Constitution of the Philippines. They had government officials there write it for them. And that really got me thinking, how similar are the constitutions between countries that the United States kind of helped, or if countries that were independent, like away from the United States, not affiliated with them, how different their constitution is or how similar it is. And through that, I also, a personal story is like, I really enjoy like making slide presentations. And so I guess fonts really kind of fit in, and I really like to format it in a way that looks to me the best. And through that, I started to learn about how the world was connected and how the countries affect each other. So one country like the United States, a big government does changes one thing, it affects kind of the whole world. So into that, a little backstory into that, let's get started. So to start off, a constitution, I kind of wanted to make sure we were on the same page. It's a set of rules of fundamentals that were set to help the govern a body of people and to determine the power of officials. Usually this is set so there's no tyranny in the government, as well as it just helps people know who has power, how much power do they have, and what are the limits and freedoms, of course. And so the Constitution is really just the backbone of how the country's government is going to work. And I think it's important to take a look at the constitutions. So taking a look, let's start off with the United States Constitution. This constitution was probably the most familiar I am with because I am from this country, was study here a lot. And so as we always see the Constitution is written by the first three words, big words, is called "We the People." And kind of a little backstory to that is that the United States was kind of ruled by the British and had other influences from European powers. So they wanted to really separate themselves and not have a tyrannical government, a government that will support the citizens. And so "We the People" kind of makes us stand out. And it's really important to know how this constitution is formatted. And this is written in 1787. So as you can see, it is in cursive. in small fonts as well. It's really kind of hard to read, and it has a lot of smudges and crinkles because this has been over 200 years. And it's really important to note the capitalization of the Constitution. It says the articles, there's articles within the Constitution. Furthermore, in the Constitution, there's a lot of pages to it. So there's Articles 1, 2, 3, and so on forth. And the thing that separates it, makes it with the big spaces in between it, well, not as big, but the bigger than the usual, the small little letter writing, but also how it's capitalized and similar to the 3 words that says "we the people." And to kind of put this into perspective, the United States Constitution was kind of the oldest and shortest constitution at the time. And so it's interesting to see how a lot of countries will stem from this constitution, or how things will change. And it's over 4,400 words. So it's a pretty big constitution. And it is notable to see that at the end of the Constitution, there's people that signed it, government officials, so some even presidents later on in the United States history, and to see how consistent it is with the fonts. And so to take that into consideration, let's look at the next Constitution. The next Constitution is the Constitution of Canada. And this Constitution, as you can see, it has color. And originally, the first Constitution was written in 1867. Unfortunately, I could not find the Constitution of it, but I found the most recent one that looks like a Constitution. And as you can see, there's different formats than the United States. It's formatted in a way that's, I guess, more clear, but also has color and symbols and different font sizes, color, and different font types. It even has images, which is really odd to see from my perspective, because I usually just look at the United States Constitution. And I also have looked at, it's even categorized in a way that there's like headers to the little paragraphs that it has. And it's more formatted, so it's less cursive, it's more legible, more readable, and of course there's titles and fonts to separate it. And as you can see, there's a signature down below. I believe that was the Prime Minister of Canada at the time in 1882. And I think I have seen furthermore that also the Queen Elizabeth II also has taken part of signing into it, as the British and European people do have some influence in Canada. So yeah, I think this is really important to note, like 2 major differences between 2 different constitutions, even through the states that are, countries that are really right next to each other, one border away, how different it is, of course, how they have changed it and adapted to it. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. The next one is Mexican Constitution. A little history about Mexico. So they were ruled by Spain, and they really wanted to take their own independence. And so when they got it in 1824, they wrote their first constitution. I was lucky able to find it, I was lucky to find it. As you can see, it translates to Constitution, Federal Constitution of the United States of the Mexican United States. So it translates to kind of similar to the United States of America, but only just transferred to Mexico. And that kind of is important to note how the United States was formally settled into the country that it is, and how Mexico kind of took influence, I guess, in the part of it, you can say, because it is a little similar. Later on, it would just turn to Mexico, but that's the first constitution that we were able to look at from Mexico. So as you can see, the Constitution is formatted in, it's more middle aligned than anything. It has the margins on the left, right, and right side are pretty equal. And there's a huge gap between the title and the actual start of the words. It looks like it's typewritten, but it may be also cursive, as it looks like it's pretty legible to read. And there has been several iterations of the Constitution of Mexico, and the most recent iteration, I think, is from 1917. So I was able to find the original one and see how different it is from the United States, as Mexico was a country later on independent, more independent than the United States, who was originally in the 1700s. And there was people that signed it. The president at the time signed it, and important figures trying to separate church and state was really important in their constitution, as they were ruled by Spain. To look into the next big country is the French Constitution. The French Constitution really was interesting, as I have read earlier that the French really admired the United States and its government. Their first constitution, I believe, was in 1791, mistype there. But as you can see, it looks like they have a preamble, which is interesting because we do have a preamble, and they initially, I guess, got influenced by the United States with our preamble. And I don't really know a lot about French. I can't read French, but if I'm assuming, I think it says the people, the French people, the first three words from my guesses. And that's really interesting because our constitution says we the people, and it kind of looks at the similarities and differences. Although like this constitution isn't handwritten, even though it's really close time period with the United States, like only like 20 years-ish of difference. It looks like it's typewritten, if I'm not wrong. And also you can see that it does have articles. It says in the bottom right there in the italicized, it says article premier, which I'm assuming it's 1. And so that kind of plays into the part of the United States, how they have their constitution set up where they have articles 1 and they have it separated. But here in the French Constitution, they have article 1, but they have, instead of having the articles separated by each like big words, they kind of have it on the side. And it's interesting to see how the French Constitution does look very similar. And how it's very consistent. It's very neat and typewritten, as well as it looks like it's very equally in proportionate in the margins, and how it does have a little segment where it says in the bottom, Constitution has a little segment, and then it has a preamble. And so yeah, it's really interesting. The Constitution of France, specifically in France, they really liked how the United States had a president as and how it wasn't overpowering, and it also had people working towards it, common people, I guess. So King Louis the 16th signed it, and later on towards the end. And of course, there's no smudges. It looks pretty neat and clear to me. All right, so I'm a little less familiar with Argentina as a country. So from what I've learned is that Argentina wrote its first constitution in 1853. I have read that the United States did have a little bit influence in Argentina in terms of the government. And as you can see, it is written in the cursive. It looks like it's written in handwritten cursive, as it's very uniform at the same time, very neat. And it says Constitution of the Confederation of Argentina, the Argentinian Confederation. That's the title of the Constitution. I am able to read in Spanish because I have been fluent in Spanish, so I'm lucky to be able to read it. So the first word that is in the Constitution says us, and that kind of plays into part of how the United States Constitution is written. it has, you can see that the us is written in a larger text. It's written in a fancier text than the other words, as it's kind of similar to the French one and the United States one. And as you can see below, the bigger text, it says part 1, and it says chapter 1, the only chapter. And it's kind of interesting how it's kind of the same thing as the articles, the article 1, and how it's kind of sectioned off and formatted the same as the United States. And overall, this Constitution looks a little, with more smudges, more old, but overall it's pretty spaced out, and it looks like it's more to the right side of the page, which is interesting. And yeah, it's overall pretty consistent. And it was later revised. They had many modifications. By 1972, they had more modifications and lots of iterations throughout the constitutions that I have learned, and that really play an important part. As the countries, the country's government sees that they should improve more on the laws and make it more clear. And so what really I took away from these comparisons and analysis that I took was that usually fonts are pretty consistent. Either if they looked handwritten or they were typed, they looked pretty consistent in the ways that they were formatted, and they kind of wanted to make things stand out. And by making things stand out, like the preamble or like the headings, they made them different fonts, slightly different. Just like we do like nowadays, we kind of make titles a little different, as well as they also made them bigger in size to make sure that's the first thing you kind of see. And overall, what I have seen is that the United States has had a big influence in the countries that we have looked at. We can see that the French really took part in that. The Mexico really liked the United States part of the country's name, and as well as Argentina really liked the us being the united part. And that kind of takes into perspective whether the United States helped them or had some sort of influence, either economically, military, or even societal, in the way of like pressuring to have a similar government like the United States. Perhaps that could be a question into consideration. And I did learn that the United States had officials again in the Philippines. And so that kind of plays into perspective. So what other countries do we not know of that had influence? And I can't remember exactly if it's South or North Vietnam, but one of them did have the Gettysburg Address in part of their constitution at one time, which is interesting to see how much the United States did play influence in their country. And overall, people really admired the United States. It was the first government to come from out of a tyrannical world government to fight their way through. And it was really interesting to see how the constitutions were formatted. As I usually study only the United States Constitution in school, I was able to branch out and get more perspective in different constitutions. And in the future, I would really like to look at different constitutions in Asian languages that has more dialogue in that area, although I will not be able to read it because I cannot read that language yet. I do hope to look at it more, hopefully translate it to see if it has similar language, similar format, similar fonts, to see if there was any connection between the United States and those other countries greatly influenced. So I would like to make some acknowledgements. I did take some images from Wikimedia Commons. I did take information from encyclopedia.com, National World War II Museum.org. I did learn some information from there too, especially the South Asian countries' influence. And I would like to also thank my teacher, mentor, Ms. Claudio, for guiding me through everything, and as well as tech users group for this amazing online conference. It's really incredible that we're doing this all as a community. And yeah, really thank you so much. So thank you for listening. Questions, comments, concerns are welcome. I am Sarai Castañeda, and you could reach me at the Gmail down below.
Very interesting presentation, Sari. I come from a country that has a constitution every few years. They decide to write a new one, and I got really interested by the time of the last one was written. By the way, the country I mentioned is Brazil, and apparently it was written by a set of constitutional lawyers in New York, and they who specialize in writing constitutions for countries. And they write it in English, and you translate it to your own local language, and you make your ways and so forth. And I said, well, but nobody writes it by hand, like the American Constitution. And I was asking one guy that participated in one of these dealings with these lawyers in New York, and he says, no, you just have a program. You say you want free speech, you want the right of a free press, you want maternity leave for 4 months, you want this, and this guy clicks on the computer and adds and makes it in English, and then after a little while he prints a piece of paper that he takes to you, and then you do the translation. I said, oh my God, this is completely different of the American Constitution. It's not, it can't look as beautiful as the ones that we have in here. And this week I had access to the originals, and in fact it was printed in Times Roman.
Yeah, it's really interesting how different countries have their different ways of writing constitutions. Yeah,
one of the nice issues about the American Constitution is the longevity, and some would say it's not a good property, the immutability, the fact that it doesn't change very often. In Brazil, they amend the Constitution 5-6 times a year, and something which will be unheard of in America. And as such, has to be done by computers and not by papers, and not by this historical documents and so forth. Very nice to see all of them. What did you research to get all these texts?
I maybe just looked at images and tried to kind of research what time period they were written around, and that's how I was able to gain access to images.
Any particular place, or Internet Archives, or anything, or it was just a country-specific thing?
I just mainly searched it up on Google, and then it took me to different sites, and try to make sure I was in a safe site that didn't take my information as much.
We have a couple questions in chat and a comment in Q&A. Paul, if you want to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the Q&A, there's a sort of comment that is very informative, enjoying the talk by Dennis, and on the chat, there is more. Thank you for a lot of these images and their analysis. Is the Mexican Constitution written by hand or mechanically printed? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. From what I was able to gain is that only that image, because the first original Constitution was very hard to get a hold of. It took a few Google searches, and I was only able to get that one. I think it should have been written by hand because it's very old, but maybe they just translated it into a more typewritten situation. So that's something to take in consideration, how much is modified from the original, from from like handwritten to like they just try to make it more like digital in the way.
And Jeremy just puts an addendum there. He's one of our next chairs at TUG, and he said that quite funnily, the preamble of the French Constitution is against the independence of overseas territories.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's enshrined in the Constitution.
Yeah. It's also interesting how there's like so much things that is written in the constitutions that we don't take into consideration, that we don't know or aren't aware of, like I guess hidden rules that we don't know, like if, for example, in the French Constitution. And I think there's like a lot of issues with like my country, the United States Constitution, that a lot of people don't know about their rights in the Constitution. So I think it's interesting to see and able to read it, hopefully when I'm able to like translate, especially like to like foreign countries that I see, to see their rules and how it's written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, nice. Thanks so much for all of this.
I think, I raised hand. I just say that as far as I know, there are no country with the original constitution typeset in TEG. I always thought that Czech Republic could be one because TEG played play a very prominent role in the old days when the dissidents used TEG for their work and so on. But I don't think that the Czech Republic had the original constitution typeset in TEG. And I just wonder if you think that typography of a constitution tells us something about the country. I just wonder how it would be to live in a country with a text-based constitution. I really don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight.
There's a very interesting comment as well on a new one on the Q&A, Sarai, that some of the comparisons span a huge number of years, like starting at the U.S. Constitution in 1776 and going all the way to the Canadian Charter in 1982 was more than 200 years apart, and that you can see even the difference in language. For example, the word blessings on the second line of the U.S. Constitution has a old long form of the lowercase s, followed by a short form lowercase s. And he's suggesting or asking if you try to compare one that's printed with modern technology and another one which is with other contemporary copies from other countries.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting insight. I didn't think about that, to make it, I guess, in a more equal platform, since I guess like I'm always used to looking at the Constitution written like in the older form. Maybe since the handwriting is really cursive and very small, we are like missing a lot of parts of comparing the copies, different copies of it, how it's written, how it's printed in modern technology. So yeah, I will definitely take that into consideration, comparing the copy of the United States Constitution printed in more modern technology, like for example, like the Canadian Charter one that has images and symbols and color to it.
I just emailed you his comment. It's very long, and so if you want to read with more attention later on, I sent you to it by email.
Okay, thank you.